Good evening, dear friends of fairy tales. This is Jadwiga again, your fairy tale teller. Today I'm going to tell you a story from Denmark, and it's called Tne Wise Queen. Once upon a time there was a young prince, and all people agreed they had never seen a good-looking man like him, because he was really good, extremely good looking. And that pleased him and made him proud. But people also said they had never seen a prince or a man as smart as him. And he believed that. So when he decided to get married and to look for a wife, he said that the girl he would marry had to be at least as beautiful as he himself and a little bit less wise. Now he traveled his country, but there were many really beautiful young girls, but they were not so smart. And the smart ones were not beautiful. So he decided, if I cannot find my wife to be in my own country, I have to travel the world. And this he did. But it was everywhere, it was the same. The beautiful girls were not smart, and the smart girls were not beautiful. So he was very disappointed, and on his way back home, when he got lost in a huge forest. So he was riding through that forest all day long, but there seemed to be no end, and he thought he might have to spend the night outside with the wild animals and with nothing to eat, neither for himself nor for his horse. So when he saw a light over there, he was very happy, because he said, where is the light? There must be people. And really, it was a tiny little house where he ended up, and he knocked on the door, but nobody opened. He knocked again, and eventually an old man opened, and an old woman standing right behind him, looking who was that at their door. And the prince said, I'm so sorry, I got lost in the forest. Please let me stay in your house and give me something to eat for my horse and for myself. And I'm sorry, I don't want to disturb you, but I need your help. The old man looked at him and said, we are poor people. We cannot offer a room and a food that applies to you. But the man said, no, that doesn't matter. I don't expect luxury. I simply want a shelter for the night. So they eventually agreed that he put his horse into a shed where he found some hay and water for it, and then came over into the house where the old couple shared their meal with him, which was dry bread and milk. They were talking, and the young prince asked, are you living all alone here in this vast forest? Yes, they said. There is nobody else here. We are just the two of us. And they offered him their bed, but he did not want to take that. He said, no, I will sleep here on the straw, on the floor, and you stay in your bed. And so they did. They spread some straw on the floor, and the young man lay down to sleep. Well, since he was very, very tired, he really fell asleep quite quickly and easily. But, He was not used to sleeping on a hard floor just with some straw. And so he woke up very early that morning with everything hurting and not really being able to move, when, oh, he heard a noise above him on the attic. Well, that might be mice or rat, or maybe even a cat. But then a spinning wheel started to move. And with that spinning wheel, he heard the voice of a young girl singing in the rhythm of that spinning wheel. And it was so beautiful that he immediately fell in love. And now when the old couple came, he said, "You lied upon me. There is somebody upstairs. I want to know who that is." There was no need to deny, so they said, yes, you're right. It's our daughter up there. But she is so beautiful that we are hiding her, because we are afraid somebody would fall in love with her and take her away, and then we are here all alone with no help when we become older. "Well, I want to see her," said the prince. "Call her down." The young girl came down. She had not realized that there was a guest in the house, so she jumped down the stairs, and when she saw this young prince, frightened and blushed. But even though her face was red, the prince saw that this was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Oh, he thought to himself, she is stupid. I'm sure she's stupid. But he couldn't help but looking at her. And the girl looked at him. But he took off his horse off the shed, put on the saddle, and before he left the family, he gave a good money to the old couple and looked back to the young girl, and the girl looked at him. And she looked after him even after he had long disappeared. Now the prince found his home, and despite the good food he got there, he had no appetite. And despite the soft and wonderful bed he had there, he could not sleep. He could only think about this young girl because he had fallen in love with her. So he decided to prove that she was stupid. And he sent 2 servants to her house. He explained very exactly where they could find it, with a letter for her. And the servants should return the same day with the answer. So they found the young girl, and handed her over the letter of the prince. She opened it, and there was a tangled piece of silk, and he wrote that she should make a bed curtain for him out of this tangled silk. She sent the answer back to him, and she took 2 little pieces of wood, added them in the envelope, and said, "My dear prince, if you are able to make a weaving loom out of these little 2 pieces of wood for me, then I will be happy to weave that bed curtain for you on that loom." And so she sent the servants back to him. When he received that answer, he realized that she was indeed very smart. And now he took all his encourage and they went to the house of that girl, and he said, "Will you marry me?" And she wanted. Wonderful. But, he said, there is one condition. When I become king, I want you to never ever get engaged in my business of ruling the country. Otherwise, I will send you back to your parents. Do you agree with that? Sure, she said. I won't get involved in your government. But if one day you should get rid of me and send me back home to my parents, I want to take one thing I love most with me. And he thought that this was fair and agreed to that too. Now they got married, and soon after their wedding, the old king passed away, so that they became king and queen. And they were very happy with each other and lived in happy harmony many, many years. Until one day it happened that there was a market in the city, which is not unusual, it happens very often. And the farmers come from all sides of the country to sell their animals and their vegetable and whatever they produce. And when they are finished, they go to the pub. They put their horses into the stable and have a beer or two or three, who knows. Now there was one farmer who had a pregnant mare, and he put that mare into the stable where the pub owner's horses were too. And after having a couple of beer, he came into the stable and wanted to take his horse off, and immediately saw that the mare had given birth to a little one, to a child. But with all these men, noisy men coming into that stable, the little horse was so frightened that it ran over to the other corner of the stable where the geldings of the pub owner were. And when he wanted to take, the farmer wanted to take the little horse, the pub owner said, "No, this is not your horse, that's mine." And the farmer said, "Hey, I came with a mare with a little one in her belly, and now she's given birth to it. This is my horse, that's of course." But the pub owner wouldn't agree. He insisted that this little horse was his. And all these guys standing around, all the others, they too agreed that this was not the farmer's horse. So the farmer had to go home with only his horse and not the little one. But he thought that this was very unjust, and he went to court. And the judge, listening to that story, said, "That's clear. That's the pub owner's horse." The farmer still couldn't understand that. Now, this had already cost a lot of money, but he wouldn't give up. He went to the highest court, which was the king. So he went to the king and told him the story, and the king listened to the pub owner and to the other people, the witnesses, and at the end, he said, "That's clear. It's the pub owner's horse, not yours." And now the farmer was so poor by paying all this money for the tribunal, he had lost his farm and his horse and everything. And you can imagine he was desperate. And the last and only thing he could think of to get help was to go to the Queen. He went to the Queen and told her that story, and the Queen said, "Oh, of course, this is your horse. But I'm sorry, I cannot influence my husband because this would end up very badly for me. So I'm sorry I cannot help you." But when she saw the farmer being so desperate, she said, "Listen, every noon the king is riding across the dunes to the ocean. Tomorrow you will be there in the dunes and pretend to fish. And when the king asks you what you are doing there, you will say, 'Well, if a gelding can get birth to a horse, why couldn't I get fish out of the sand?'" "But," she said, "never ever tell anybody who gave you that advice, because I will be very, very unhappy if the king gets to know that I gave you that advice." And the farmer promised and went home. The next noon, he took a net, a fishing net, and all kinds of fishing equipment and spread it out over the dunes when the king came along. And he watched that farmer. He stopped and said, "What are you doing, man? How can you believe to get fish out of the sand?" "Well," said the farmer, "that's very easy. When a gelding can give birth to a little horse, then I might be able to fish in the sand." Now the king realized that he had made a mistake. But he wanted to know, who told you to do that here? And the farmer wouldn't tell him, no. But then the king said, "If you don't tell me, I will kill you." And so the farmer had to admit that it was the queen herself who had this advice for him. Now the king was very upset. He returned back home straight away to his wife and said, "You did not obey to our rules, so you have to go back to your parents." And the queen said, "Yes, my dear husband, you are right. I did wrong. I'm sorry." And she disappeared in the neighbor room and returned with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. And she said, "Well, we have lived in harmony for so many years. Now let us at least have a drink to say goodbye." The king agreed. They sat down and had their wine. But the king did not only have wine in his glass, but also a very strong sleeping potion. So he almost immediately fell asleep, sound asleep. And then the queen took a huge travel basket where she had put her clothes in. She put her husband on top, covered him with other layers of dresses, shut the cover, locked it, and told the servants to bring that onto the coach that would bring her home. And when they had reached her parents' house, the servants had to carry that basket up the stairs into her room, where she took off her beloved husband, put him on her bed, and she dressed the same way as she had been when they first met. And then she sat down at the spinning wheel, started to spin. When the king woke up, he was very surprised to find himself in this room. And he asked, "Hey, what am I doing here? How did I come here? How can you dare to bring me here?" But she said, "My dear husband, I only did what you had agreed with me to do, because I brought the only thing, the one and only thing I love most. I brought that with me." Now the king realized how much he was loved and how smart his wife was. So he called the servants to bring them all back, including the parents, the old parents. And from this day on, he never ever made an important decision without asking his wife first. The Wise Queen.